Yay? Even if we look back at the classic Wally World era, the honest truth is that the station wagon is dead. Sounds harsh. But seriously, when did you last spot a brand new American station wagon on a showroom floor? Odds are, it was well over a decade ago, if not longer. Actually make that 3 decades. The Chevrolet Caprice and Buick Roadmaster, our last full-sized American wagons, were both axed in 1996. And you know I can always rely on you guys to keep me on my toes. Lately, I have been getting flooded with requests to make a video on classic station wagons. I totally agree. This is a story that deserves to be told about a vehicle that hauled entire suburban families to ball games, carpools, and school plays. The station wagon is easily one of the most successful vehicles in American history. Let me prove it to you. Back in 1976, when domestic sales neared 1 million and grabbed 10% of the market, Americans had 62 different wagon models to choose from. Mind blown yet. For comparison, we barely have that many SUV models on sale today, and we all know how absolutely dominant SUVs are now. Think back to your last family road trip in one of these classics. I bet it involved faux wood paneling and AM/FM radio, and bickering with your siblings over who got to sit in the way back, that rear-facing third row where you could pull faces at the drivers behind you. If you are like me, you had no clue they were in trouble. Station wagons felt as permanent as baseball and apple pie. So what happened? How did we go from 62 models to 0 American-made wagons in just 20 years? Well, that is what we are uncovering today. This story actually starts in a completely different America. We are talking the early 1900s, back when most people still traveled by train. And that is where the name comes from. These were literally utility wagons built to service train stations. Early on, people called them depot hacks because they worked around train depots as basic taxi cabs. Let me paint a picture of what these early rides looked like. Picture stepping off a train in 1910 with a massive mountain of luggage. There is no Uber and no modern taxis. You needed a vehicle to haul both you and your heavy gear to your final destination. Enter the depot hack, essentially a modified truck with passenger benches and plenty of luggage space. The first big breakthrough came from Henry Ford naturally. In 1910, for $700, Ford sold bare Model T chassis to custom shops that built wooden bodies on top. So Ford was not actually building these station wagons yet. They only supplied the chassis. Small shops nationwide crafted the custom wooden bodies. In 1909, America had over 500 car manufacturers. Can you imagine today we have maybe 3 main ones? But here is where the story gets interesting. That shift from depot hack to station wagon happened between 1923 and 1929. No one knows exactly when, but by 1929, when the first official station wagon from the American Big Three was introduced as a Ford Model A, the name had stuck. The real shift came in 1935 when Chevrolet did something nobody had ever tried before. They built an all-steel station wagon, no wood. Well, mostly no wood. Surprisingly, it did not catch on immediately because buyers genuinely loved that wooden look. Wood-made wagons look expensive and highly prestigious. Throughout the 1930s and early 1940s, these iconic woodies cost far more than standard passenger cars. They were status symbols. Ford was not about to let Chevy win this fight, so in 1936, they opened a dedicated wagon plant in Iron Mountain, Michigan. This was no ordinary factory. Located in the state's Upper Peninsula, it sourced raw lumber directly from Ford's massive timber operations right near Lake Superior. Ford literally owned the forests. They shipped fully built wooden bodies directly to assembly plants all across North America. But the classic Woody had a dirty little secret. They were a massive headache to maintain. The wood demanded constant attention. You had to varnish it regularly, check for rot, and keep those joints tight. They needed endless upkeep, which paved the way for all-steel wagons. Imagine having to refinish your family car every single year like it was a piece of patio furniture. The big shift happened right after World War II. In 1946, Willys, the famous Jeep company, unveiled a revolutionary new vehicle. The 1946 Willys Jeep station wagon became the first family-sized, all-steel production wagon. Even with simulated wood grain sides, this was a massive deal. They painted fake wood grain on the sides because buyers still linked wood with luxury, but structurally, it was pure steel. By 1949, the writing was on the wall for real woodies. Plymouth debuted the Suburban, an all-steel wagon that looked gorgeous and did not require you to be an amateur carpenter. After that historic 1949 Plymouth Suburban debut, genuine wood wagons quickly faded away. Sure, a few brands used real wood trim into the mid-1950s, but after that, it was pure illusion, just vinyl decals mimicking wood. When you think about it, that is a perfect metaphor for post-war suburban America. Now we get to the fun part, the golden era of the station wagon. To understand why these family cars became a massive deal, you have to look at post-World War II America. We are talking about the rise of suburbia, the brand new interstate highway system, and the massive baby boom. Suddenly, millions of growing families needed a spacious vehicle built for longer road trips and all the gear of modern suburban life. The 1950s were when demand truly exploded. Station wagons went from accounting for less than 3% of overall U.S. auto production in 1950 to nearly 17% by the end of the decade. Think about that. In just 10 years, they went from a niche choice to almost 1 in 5 sales. By 1958, something incredible happened. The top-selling body style in the entire Plymouth lineup was the station wagon. Not the sedan, not the coupe, the wagon. What made them so special back then? Well, for starters, they were massive. We are talking absolute land yachts here. These weren't just cars, they were rolling living rooms. Take the 1968 Ford Country Squire. This thing was over 218 inches long. That is over 18 feet. For comparison, a modern Chevy Tahoe is only 210 inches. Yeah, your giant SUV is smaller than Grandpa's vintage wagon. But it was about more than size. These classic wagons represented something bigger. They were the ultimate symbol of the American dream. Families wanted it all, especially after the hardships of the 30s and the war years. And the family station wagon was going to deliver exactly that. It was the ultimate multi-purpose vehicle for their expanding horizons. Big families, suburban homes, hobbies, weekend trips, and even a bit of prestige. The sheer variety was mind-blowing. Remember when I mentioned 62 wagon models back in 1976? Let me break down what that really meant. You had 2-door models, 4-door wagons builds with roof pillars, pillarless hardtops, and models with 2 rows of seating. Others had 3 rows. Some featured rear-facing third rows, while others had side-facing jump seats. Honestly, those tailgates were pure engineering genius. Some swung open like regular doors. Others dropped down like trucks. GM even invented a clamshell design where the entire tailgate completely disappeared when you opened it. The 1960s brought even more cool designs. This was the era of the Vista Cruiser, famous for its raised roof and built-in skylights. See, panoramic roofs aren't some new invention. Buick and Oldsmobile were putting glass panels in wagon roofs way back in the 60s. There were compacts like the Ford Falcon midsize wagons, and of course giant full-size behemoths that could seat 9 people comfortably. Well, comfortably if you did not mind rubbing shoulders with your siblings. Let's talk about the cultural impact. In the 1960s and early 70s, if you were a middle-class American family, you probably owned a station wagon. It was just what families did. These vehicles weren't mere transportation, they were mobile headquarters for the household. School runs, grocery trips, camping weekends, driving to grandma's house 3 states away. This car did it all. And the marketing, oh man, the marketing was pure genius. Ford named their top-tier wagon the Country Squire to make you feel like wealthy gentry. Chrysler offered the town and country. It was built to handle both your daily city commute and your weekend escapes. Every major brand had wood grain styling packages. Sure, by the 1960s, it was all just cheap vinyl, but families loved it. That fake wood trim screamed, "I have made it louder than any chrome badge ever could." These classic rides weren't just for hauling groceries. By the late 1960s, you could buy a wagon with a big block V8 that flew. We are talking 400-plus cubic inch engines in some models. Sure, they got about 8 miles per gallon, but fuel was cheap back then. What could possibly go wrong? Now let's look at the numbers. And I know some of you might think, oh, great financial talk. But stick with me here because this is where things get wild. On the surface, the station wagon market looked incredibly strong through the early 1970s. Sales were booming, profits were high, and Detroit was churning out vehicles as fast as possible. But warning signs were flashing if you knew where to look. Let me break this down like we are on Shark Tank. In business, you always want to keep costs low and prices high. Sounds simple, right? Well, the catch was that station wagons were incredibly expensive to manufacture. They had all the moving parts of standard sedans. Plus, you needed longer frames, larger roofs, more glass, extra seats, and heavy-duty suspension to handle the cargo. Even their specialized tailgates were highly complex. And here is the kicker, automakers could not charge much more for them. In 1970, when annual sales peaked at 972,000 units, representing 10% of all car sales, the Big Three made decent money on each wagon, but their margins were far from spectacular. Profit margins were actually way better on standard sedans because they were simpler to build, but with high volume, things were fine. Then came October 1973. That month, the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OAPEC, announced a massive total oil embargo. If you weren't around, then it is hard to grasp how insane things got. Global oil prices shot up 300% from $3 to $12 a barrel. This 70s oil shock changed everything. Imagine waking up tomorrow to find that gasoline costs 4 times what you pay right now. The economic blow was fast and brutal. Drivers faced massive lines at pumps starting in 1972 and growing worse by 1973. People spent hours waiting just to buy fuel, and once they finally reached the pump, they were capped at 10 gallons or less. Some states used odd even rationing based on your license plate. It was total chaos. You might think this hit every vehicle equally right. Wrong. You see, family wagons were incredibly vulnerable because they were absolute gas guzzlers. We are talking 10 to 12 miles per gallon on a good day. When gas prices quadrupled and supply dried up, that giant wagon sitting in your driveway stopped looking like the suburban dream. Instead, it felt like a massive anchor around your neck. The sales data tells the whole story. After peaking at nearly 1 million units in 1970, wagon demand started to slide. By 1974 and 1975, they had completely cratered. Sales of full-size station wagons, in particular, took a massive hit, dropping dramatically during those mid-70s years. Chrysler saw the writing on the wall first. They killed their full-size wagons in 1978. Think about that, one of the big three just walked away from the market entirely. But it gets worse. Not only were these big wagons expensive to run and build, but the entire auto industry was hitting major new roadblocks. New emission standards in 1972 forced manufacturers to spend millions redesigning engines. The powerful V8s under the hood had to be neutered to meet regulations, making them perform poorly and burn even more fuel. So by the late 1970s, the traditional American station wagon was in deep trouble. But honestly, fuel crises and emissions rules were just the beginning. The real killer was coming, and it emerged from an unexpected source: Chrysler, the same brand that had just abandoned full-size wagons. See, Lee Iacocca had just taken the wheel at Chrysler. The company was drowning, and they needed a revolution, not a tiny upgrade. Then in 1984, they dropped it. The minivan, the Dodge Caravan and Plymouth Voyager changed the game. These minivans hauled to families way better than old station wagons ever could, and they cost a lot less. Just think about why they were so incredibly brilliant. They gave you more cabin space than a wagon despite being shorter bumper to bumper. Plus, those sliding doors made packing kids into tight parking spots a total breeze. Drivers sat up higher for a better view of the road. And because they used car frames, they handled better than commercial vans while hauling more than classic wagons. It was pure genius. But there is a hidden factor no one talks about: image. By the 1980s, the station wagon was officially deeply uncool. They screamed boring suburban conformity, representing everything uncool about the 50s and 60s. If you were a baby boomer raised in the back of your parents' country squire, the absolute last thing you wanted to buy was one of those. You wanted something fresh, something proving you were not your parents. While the minivan felt fresh enough, it was only the opening punch. The real knockout blow arrived from Japan, and it came wearing hiking boots. We are talking about the massive SUV boom, specifically rugged icons like the Jeep Cherokee debuting in 1984. Sure, SUVs existed before. Think the Suburban, the Wagoneer, or the Bronco, but those were truck-based beasts that rode like well trucks. The Cherokee was totally different. It was compact, it had 4 doors, a sleek design, and crucially was marketed as a lifestyle ride. You were not just buying a work truck, you were buying an image of rugged outdoor adventure. Then came the Toyota 4Runner in 1984, the Pathfinder in 1986, and the Explorer in 1990. Every new model bit deeper into the station wagon market. By the early 90s, the writing was not just on the wall, it was flashing in neon. The last American wagon makers were bleeding cash on every single sale. Let me give you some perspective on just how brutal this collapse really was. Wagons stayed popular through the 1970s, but after that, they fell off a cliff. By 2004, only 26 models remained, including 2 Fords, 1 Chrysler, and 1 GM. By 2016, just 8 were left. Those final gasps were painful to watch. The Ford Taurus wagon died in 2005. The Focus wagon vanished by 2008. GM survived longest with the Caprice and Roadmaster, but gave up in 1996. To add insult to injury, many final wagons were just lazy clones of each other. The Caprice, the Roadmaster, and the Oldsmobile Custom Cruiser were identical cars with different badges. It felt like watching an aging champion boxer who was too proud to stay down. What truly sealed their fate was a perfect storm. First CAFE standards, corporate average fuel economy made it incredibly hard for automakers to justify building heavy, gas-guzzling wagons. But here is the wild part. Trucks and SUVs got a pass with much looser rules, so car brands could sell a massive Suburban with terrible gas mileage, yet face 0 penalties. Talk about a backwards system. Plus, the profit margins on those SUVs were absolutely huge. A Ford Explorer cost maybe $1,000 more to make than a Taurus wagon, but fetched $5,000 to $10,000 more. If you are running an auto brand, which model are you going to build third? And this is the most frustrating part. Buyers convinced themselves they needed massive SUVs for safety, though 99% never left the asphalt. And that safety boost was really just about being bigger than the other guy. We traded genuine utility for a tough image, and the wagon paid the price. So, where are we now? Believe it or not, the station wagon is not entirely dead. It is basically in a coma, with luxury European brands keeping it on life support. Companies like Audi and Volvo, along with BMW and Mercedes, still sell wagons in America. They just call them Avant Touring or Estate, because apparently the phrase station wagon is a dirty word now. The statistics are pretty grim. In 2015, American wagon sales accounted for just 1.1% of the entire market. That is 188,959 units, which is less than what Ford sells of the F-150 in 2 months. But here is the ironic twist. Remember when I told you SUVs killed off the wagon? Well, today we buy crossovers, which are literally just lifted wagons. Think about it. What is a Honda CR-V or Toyota RAV4 besides a tall wagon? They use car platforms, feature a rear hatch, and host 5 to 7 passengers. The only actual difference is a few extra inches of ground clearance and some plastic trim over the wheels. The Subaru Outback mastered this formula first. When it debuted back in 1994, it was quite literally a legacy wagon with a lift kit and plastic armor. But Subaru was brilliant. They marketed it as a rugged outdoor machine, completely avoiding the wagon label. And it worked. The Outback became a massive bestseller, proving Americans will gladly buy wagons if you change the name. There have been some attempts to revive the wagon. Cadillac built the stunning CTS Sport Wagon from 2010 to 2014. It looked incredible. It handled like an absolute dream, offered a V8 option that destroyed sports cars, and sold about as fast as ice cream in a blizzard. BMW sold a measly 400 units of their 5 Series Touring in 2009 before quitting. The latest casualty, the Buick Regal Tour X, lasting from 2018 to 2020. 2 short years is all it survived, and it was genuinely a fantastic car. Smooth, practical, stylish, and cheap, yet buyers looked at it and said, "No thanks, I will take the Enclave instead," which was essentially the same platform, just taller and worse on gas. So what would it actually take to bring wagons back? Honestly, I think that ship has already sailed. Modern American infrastructure is fully designed around SUVs and crossovers. Even our parking spaces are sized for them. Fast food drive-thrus are built taller for them. Most of all, our collective ego is wrapped up in them. We convinced ourselves that we need a high vantage point, demanding that command seating position just in case we suddenly have to ford a raging river on our way to school drop-off. The only path back for the wagon is if gas spikes to $10 a gallon and stays there, or if we see a massive cultural shift making efficiency cool again. But even then, we would probably just build smaller SUVs before admitting that station wagons actually make sense. We are just stubborn like that. Plus, researching this video made me realize something. I never really got to experience the golden era of the station wagon. By the time I was born, they were already on their way out. But I do remember seeing the last few stragglers, maybe some beat-up tourist wagon in a grocery store parking lot, or an old Volvo 240 that just refused to die. Every time I saw one, it felt like spotting an endangered species. What made those wagons special was not the fuel economy, which was terrible, or the handling, which was like driving a couch. Or even the looks, let's be honest. Most were pretty ugly. It was what they represented. They were the ultimate family cruiser when family meant something specific. Mom, dad, 2.5 kids, and a dog named Spot. From what I learned making this video, the wagon was where real life happened. Where kids fought with siblings on the way to grandma's house, and families learned geography by playing license plate bingo on cross-country road trips. Where kids got their very first taste of freedom sitting in the way back facing backwards, making silly faces at the cars tailing them. No seatbelts, no airbags, just those kids, and an eighth of an inch of safety glass separating them from the highway. Honestly, I am amazed they still exist in any form. These heavy cars were proof of true American optimism. Who else would build a vehicle that got 10 miles per gallon right in the middle of an oil crisis? Who else would make the third row seats face completely backwards just for the fun of it? Who else would slap fake wood paneling on a car and say, "Yeah, that actually looks great, only us, that is who?" But here is what we lost when station wagons died. Pure practicality. Sure, your crossover is practical, but can you fit a 4x8 sheet of plywood in it? Can you crash in the back on a weekend camping trip? Can you haul 9 people plus all their luggage? A real wagon could do everything and still cost less than a modern crossover. We also lost character. Every wagon felt different. You had sport wagons trying to look cool, luxury wagons dripping in leather and chrome, and the basic models that were just honest transportation. Today, every crossover looks exactly the same, like somebody pumped up a sedan and slapped on some cheap plastic trim. Where is the personality? The demise of the station wagon shows us a lot about American consumer culture. We do not buy what makes sense. We buy what makes us feel good about ourselves. SUVs and crossovers make drivers feel safe, capable, and adventurous, even if they never actually leave the suburbs. Wagons just made people feel practical. And who really wants to feel practical, it also shows how quickly the market can shift. In just one generation, wagons went from 17% of the market to basically zero. The exact same shift could happen to SUVs under the right conditions. Maybe it is electric vehicles, maybe self-driving cars, or maybe it is something we have not even imagined yet. But change is the only constant. There is also a major lesson here about unintended consequences. CAFE standards were supposed to make cars more efficient, but they just pushed buyers toward trucks, and SUV safety rules made cars much heavier, driving down fuel economy. Every single solution created new headaches. We were basically playing automotive whack-a-mole, but maybe the biggest lesson of all is about loss. We lost something vital when wagons disappeared, a connection to a simpler, more optimistic America. A world where a family car was just that, a car for the family. Not a status symbol, not a lifestyle brand, just honest transportation that got the job done. So I have to ask, do you remember riding in a station wagon when you were young? What kind of model was it? I'm genuinely curious what wagon memories you have. Did your family own a classic country squire with fake wood panels, or maybe a Volvo wagon for you safety-conscious folks? Or were you one of those lucky kids who rode in a Vista Cruiser with those cool skylights? What do you think actually killed off the wagon? Do you agree with my theory that it was a mix of the oil crisis minivans and SUVs? Or is there more to the story? Maybe wagons were always doomed, and it just took us some time to realize it. And here's a question I really want you to consider. Do you actually miss having real station wagons around? Or are crossovers and SUVs just better? Honestly, I am torn. My brain knows that modern vehicles are safer, way more efficient, and much more capable. But my heart still misses those long, low wagons with their goofy fake wood and backwards-facing seats. For those who actually owned one, not just rode in one as a kid, but bought it with your own hard-earned money, what was that experience like? Were you trying to fight the boring suburban stereotype? Or did you fully embrace the practicality, and why did you finally sell it? Be honest. Was it because your needs changed, or did you just want something cooler? I am curious, would you actually buy a wagon today if they made them, and I mean a real wagon? Not some lifted Outback or a Mercedes E-Class that costs more than a starter home. Something like a modern country squire with 3 rows, a big V8, or maybe a hybrid setup for today. And yes, with fake wood paneling. Would that actually interest anyone today? Or have we moved too far past that era? Also, for you car enthusiasts, what is your favorite wagon of all time? It could be American, European, Japanese, whatever. What wagon do you think represents the absolute best of what this body style could be? I would love to hear what you think. And finally, what do you believe the future holds for us? Will wagons ever make a comeback in America, or are we destined to drive progressively taller vehicles until we are all riding around in monster trucks? Is there any hope for those of us who think lower is better and wagons are wonderful? If you have any other thoughts about the station wagon, leave them in the comments below. I would love to read your stories. Thanks for watching.